Topic here is Women in Abolition, Reading 6. So just to recap, here you see a list of the readings that were addressed in class, and we do have a quiz that is coming up. So we want to, have some understanding of some of the readings. For example, the American Revolution introduced you to the blood tax. It looked at the end of the American Revolution, the issue with Abigail Adams, the creation of a new country, new nation. Let's see what else. First colonies and daily life in the colonies introduced us to coverture and how early on we saw the four virtues kind of playing out. And that's all I'm going to say this time around. We're going to move on to some of the specifics in the reading here. So these are the items that you are responsible for in class. Let's take a look at some of these items. So for this particular section, I'm trying to look at the issue of politics, race, and economics. And so the question here, or the issue, is looking at the difference between free blacks and white and poor. And when we look at this situation here, the reading argues that half the Southern households own no slaves at all. So the question here is, what role does economics play? And when we get to the race section, I'm going to challenge you to think about slavery and whether or not it was about race, politics, or economics. And so here, if half the Southern households own slaves, why are the other remaining non-slave owning households buying into the institution of slavery and supporting? Should this group and this group pretty much be together? Are they in the same boat? So we'll put free black, white and poor. We'll even throw slave here. Then we'll put wealthy, WW, wealthy white. Do these three have anything in common? From an economic point of view, they do. And the issue here is, should they rally together to fight against this group? Or does this group right here find nothing in common and they don't even recognize the class exploitation that's going on? So for them, race matters more than the economics. That's kind of where that's going. Let's move on to the social stratification chart for the South. So we want to make sure we take note that with the Civil War, we are going to see the black male elevated. And so this hierarchy, this chart is going to change depending on the situation, if it's before the Civil War, after the Civil War. So with the black male voting, possibly is moving up. We'll see the white poor man. Remember, this is dependent on coverture. And so this is going to vary. But for the most part, if we're looking at it from a political lens, that would mean that the white poor man actually would move up ahead of the woman, because although this woman is married to somebody wealthy, she still is not allowed to vote. So that would mean that when we look at the end of the Civil War, we'll go white rich man, we'll go white poor man, and then we would take the black male, and then the black male would actually be higher than the white woman, and that's potentially problematic. And that's going to be an issue from the end of the Civil War going into the early 1900s for the women's suffrage movement. So if you're looking at this particular chart here, it doesn't seem to be accurate. And it also is dependent on whether or not this is from the Civil War, or after the Civil War. So we definitely want to take note of that particular point. Let's move on to the next one. This particular section of the reading looked at this individual here has an education and whether or not she has an obligation to teach any of the other, as it mentions here, teaching black children made her feel desperate, desperate, the constant warfare is crushing, killing me, she kept at it, eventually traveling south. So it's looking at the situation that somebody's put in. So here we have someone African American who is wealthy. In this case, she has an education. Does he or she have an obligation to lift up the other individuals? And so that seems to be the situation that Charlotte Fortin is dealing with here, about feeling that obligation to elevate her people out of the situation that they're experiencing as a result of the institution of slavery. And in this case, it happens to be about education. Slave breaking, we addressed this particular point here. According to this section of the reading, this has come up 2 times already. Absent the incentive of wages, how are you going to get workers to produce? Remember, slaves are not getting money, so their motivation comes from punishment. And when we're talking about punishment, we're talking about the process of slave breaking, which we addressed in reading number 5. Let's move on here. Here we look at the situation regarding the child born half black and half white. And we looked at this in a prior class where we looked at, the slave master. We're going to put here female slave, and then the social status being determined by, as a result of the black codes, the female line. Like this section here talks about she dislikes the institution yet wanted the services. So here they're talking about a woman, a white woman, and she's saying that her system is a monstrous system. And you would think, why is she calling slavery a monstrous system, considering her situation? I'm not saying it wasn't. She says it's a monstrous system. But what's her motivation? According to the reading, it says that she wants the service. So understand, like, she's not against the institution of slavery. So when we erase all of this stuff here, it almost plays out where it's like, okay, well, this white woman seems to be against slavery. But what's her motive? As I said before, she still wants the service. So that would tell me that in her view, slavery is good. But she's saying that it's a monstrous system. And the issue is the subject of sex. That's the key. She's feeling uncomplicated. And now we get to this particular section here where she is questioning the existence of the biracial child in question here. You want to take note of the use. Where did I see that? Right here. And she's saying here, people think they tend to drop from the clouds, or they pretend so to think. So that's an interesting phrase, because if they are coming from the sky, you might want to think that. So here we have a married couple, both white and free. And now we have this child here. So I don't know, they have 10 slaves, male and female. All of those children, all of the children should be either white or black. And we should be able to clearly see a physical difference. That's where this is going. But in comes this child, and they're questioning, well, that child's coming from the clouds, from the sky. Or maybe this person just doesn't want to recognize what's going on. She probably knows that she never engaged in a sexual act with a slave, and we're only talking about 2. If she didn't do it, that means he had to. And so the question here is whether or not the white women of the South are looking at the institution of slavery. Why do they disagree with it? They're not disagreeing with it for moral reasons. She's recognizing it's a monstrous system, but she's not suggesting it's a monstrous system because it's morally wrong and it's inhumane, borderline genocidal. She's only concerned about what's going on, the sexual competition that the female slave represents. And that's the same section there. That's it. So for the remainder of class, we'll be taking a look at this particular episode here and connecting it to the 4 virtues. That's it on Women in Abolition.